Hello, I'm James from GROGTALK, and this is a special episode of GROGTALK Tech or GROG Tech Talk or the technology that GROGTALK uses. I'm not quite sure which way to call it, but this is about how to stream your D&D game online, or more specifically, how we at GROGTALK stream our show every week on Saturdays at 8 o'clock, what technology we use, and we also use it for our special events like live D&D or other interviews with folks. So the reason this video came to be is last week, because of social distancing and the pandemic we were dealing with, I was speaking to Gaz from the What the Smart Party Would Do, a great podcast that I listen to. Him and Baz do a great job going over role playing. And in fact, their last episode was about how, in this age of social distancing, how you can play online, all the tools and techniques and the trials and tribulations. It's very doable, and while it's not as good as playing around the table, it certainly definitely will scratch the itch for you to play. At the end, they talked about not only if you have a good game and you want to share it, how do you not only put it on YouTube, but how do you stream it live? And so Gaz had a bunch of questions about how we did things, and so I did talk to him for a little over an hour, and that was a good conversation, but it really was more of a free form. So this hopefully will be a relatively short video about how we do it here, some of the technology that we use, the benefits to it, and some of the pitfalls, which hopefully you can avoid if you watch this. So, looking over here, I have some notes. So, my goals when we set this up was it had to be free, or as close to free. It had to be good and hopefully easy. But the top two was what we were looking for: free and good. And originally, when we started, we were just going to be a podcast only. But folks were like, hey, you should put it on YouTube. And then I was spending my whole weekend capturing the video, editing it, uploading it, and doing the podcast. And so I finally said, that's enough. Dan and I will just stream it live. And it's been a great thing, but it has been a learning process. If you're going to use this for your podcast, you want to make sure the audio quality is sufficient. Whatever you're capturing, you don't have to recapture it a second time. So we'll talk about that as well. So what are the tools? Well, if you're going to host, you're going to need to set up a number of things. So first we're going to need a computer. I've used a MacBook to do remote work. I've used a PC. The more powerful, the better. The tools that I use are very computer intensive, and your old 5-year-old laptop is probably not the best. So the more powerful, the better. For our normal for the normal stream, we use a desktop computer. It's a PC, but you can also use a Mac. The software that we use and the tools that we use work on both, but they have their unique challenges. You need a webcam or some way to stream. The higher the quality, the better. Again, I didn't want to spend a whole lot of money, so I used the Logitech 920. It's pretty much a entry level, but a standard for podcasts and streaming. It's certainly sufficient. With the right lighting and the right settings, you can get a very decent result. So you should be in either a bright room or you'll need artificial lights. We use artificial lights in here. For the way we have it set up, we use Skype when we're communicating with other people. There's lots of other tools, but for Skype and on a Windows PC, I found the software that puts this all together doesn't like to share the webcam. So I have a second, smaller, cheaper webcam that I use in Skype, and it was $20, and it's just basically for people who we're interviewing or playing with. They can see the picture, and it doesn't interfere with the stream that you're doing. So you have to kind of remember conceptually what's happening is you're taking all these inputs, whether it's your mic that's on you, your camera, and you're putting it together with what you're receiving from the other, in this case, the other players, and you're making a composite image that then you're going to send out to the streaming service, whether that's YouTube or Twitch or some other platform. So what's nice to have? An audio interface. If you are if you're ready or playing online, you probably have, hopefully you're using a mic headset, you're plugging it in. That may be sufficient for starting off, but if you want better quality and you want to add a mic to it, having an audio interface. Now I use a Zoom H6. I've also used a Mark of the Unicorn audio pre. There's plenty of them. You don't have to spend a whole bunch of money, but basically you want a couple of inputs and a couple of outputs. So if you have a couple of people here or at your local that are playing, they can have separate mics. You can plug them in. They go in the audio interface, and then you can mix that with whatever sound you're getting from your Skype or your remote users. Again, audio interface mic. These mics are lavalier mics. I'll put in the description. They're cheap. They're about 15 bucks each. They have very long cables, which is a blessing and a curse. You don't have to be standing on top of them. They're from Boya, B-O-Y-A. I don't know the exact model, but they're $15 and they work really well, and they use little batteries that last a long time. Lights. I have LED lights. They are about 40 bucks. You can go hundreds of dollars, or you can just use a normal fluorescent light and put some wax paper or something over it to diffuse the light and make it more appealing. Now, one of the topics you have to discuss or think about is, are you just going to do your role-playing theater of the mind, which means you're just going to, the DM, the referee, the GM is going to describe the situation and people are going to react to it, or you want something that has a tabletop. There's two big ones, Roll20 and Fantasy Grounds. I use Roll20 and it works fine. Fantasy Grounds, and the entry level is free. Fantasy Grounds, my understanding is the DM at least has to buy it, and then the rest of the hosts are free. Again, use what you want to use. That does make it a little more complex when you're setting up your screen that you're going to publish, but it could give people an insight. So, for instance, I would, could publish my DM view of Roll20, and people could see what's coming up next that the poor party is getting involved with. And it's good for virtual rolling and maps, so you don't have to worry about an honor system or people, because without it, if people were playing on Skype, they're just rolling the dice off camera, and again, you hopefully have players that you're playing with that there's a trust and they're doing the right thing. That's all one of the reasons why we play first edition, because sometimes a low roll is good and sometimes a low roll is bad. Your guests, if you're going to have regular players, you want to make sure they have a decent laptop, they have a headset and a quiet space. Nothing ruins an interview or a stream game having poor audio and video quality from all the people that are involved. So if you're going to have 4 players, which would be probably the maximum, 4 or 5 the maximum, each of them should be committed to having their own area with a headphone and a headset in a quiet space, and having a decent laptop with either camera or a computer that has a webcam as well. So then how are you connecting? Well, you can use Skype, you can use Zoom. Actually, Gaz was using Google Hangouts, which I guess is still a thing. I thought that went away, but I guess the folks over in the UK still embrace it and use it. That works as well. I just don't know how to set up. For our setup, we use Skype, and that's how we communicate with folks. A lot of people have gotten a lot of success with Zoom. Our dear friend Carlos Lysing, that's what he uses for his streaming. So Skype is free, at least the basic version. Zoom, I think, may be free, or you have to pay $15 a month. So again, if you're getting to the certain point where Skype is not good enough for you or having some issues, you can look at Zoom and spend a little money. Then you need a way to put this all together. For us, we use OBS. It's a free open broadcast software. And again, it's free and it works very well and it's powerful, but it has a steep learning curve. So I'm not going to go over all the things you have to do. I'm going to go over some of the key things that you want to try to figure out. You also need a way to broadcast it. You'll either need YouTube or Twitch. Those are the big ones. We use YouTube because we are not playing video games online, but a lot of people use Twitch as well. I assume it's very similar. And the thing you have to do is you'll be given a streaming key. It's this long alphanumeric string that you put into OBS, and that tells OBS to send your streaming data to YouTube or Twitch, and then when YouTube gets it, they know what to do with it and they broadcast it in your channel. You need good internet up and down. At least 10 megabit each way. If you don't know what it is, call your internet provider and say, hey, what's my current speed? They'll let you know. Because unfortunately, you're not just consuming data. Typically, we get stuff off the internet and we bring it down. Here, you're sending the stream up. So, and if you're the host, you're taking all the streams from all the people who are, all the video from all the players, putting it together, and then sending that composite stream out to YouTube so it can be broadcast. So you do need a good internet. What you also need is time and patience. You shouldn't be trying to set this up the day of the stream. You as the host, whether you're the dungeon master, game master, referee or not, should have all this stuff working and test it a number of times before you try to stream live, especially if you're going to have an audience. So, setup. You have to create a Skype and a YouTube accounts. I'm assuming you've done that in the past. Creating a Skype account, they're free. You can do that. Under YouTube, if you have YouTube, normally your channel, if you're just you have a normal account, it's not a content creator. You have to set up a content channel. And when you do, you will see under your YouTube, you will see that it has a YouTube studio. And when you set up your live videos, which is what you'll want to do, you'll see this one set up. We're set up for April 4th. And when you go to view your live dashboard, right now this is offline, but you will be given, this is the important stuff, encoder setup, your server URL, that's the website you'll be going to. Some software needs it, some doesn't. But this stream name key, this is critical. Without this, which of course is hidden, that's what you're going to put into OBS to tell OBS where to go. If someone gets this information, they can stream on your behalf, which of course is a terrible thing. Installing OBS and a camcorder. What I mean by camcorder is a webcam or some recording. Some people use a camcorder and they use a video capture device. Some people use an SLR camera like the old big cameras with lenses. Those look great, but then you still need a way to take that data from most cameras and get it into your system. Some people have used Camlink by Elgato and had good results. There's other technology, but for the easiest way to do it is to use a webcam, whether it's on your laptop or one that you buy. Now, that may be a challenge with all the pandemic going on because everyone's trying to work from home and they need webcams, but you can definitely, if you have a laptop, you could leverage it or just find a webcam and do it. So that's what you're going to need at a minimum. But again, I think it's always good to start slow and see if you get an audience, something you want to continue doing. You can always buy more expensive stuff later. All right, so at this point, you're going to install OBS. You go out to the OBS website. It's a free download depending on your platform. The one thing you're going to need if you're using Skype is the OBS out of the box, quote unquote, or the free version that you get. In order to take advantage of it, you need to install another piece called NDI. And NDI is a plugin that you add to OBS and you put it in and it allows you to capture Skype calls. So we're going to talk about that. And so what you're going to do, again, conceptually, is you're taking OBS, you're going to merge the Skype windows, your local webcam, your audio and screen and send it to YouTube. OBS is challenging. If you're not tech savvy, it is a pain. It took, I somewhat work in IT and it took me hours to get it working. Sometimes if it's not working, you're frustrated, you turn off OBS, you turn it back on, and all of a sudden it starts working. So let's look at OBS real quick. So again, when you want to get it, you would go to OBS, you type OBS download, like I've done. You go to download OBS from the OBS project, and it says downloader. In my case, I'm using Windows, and just download the installer. It'll install it on your computer. Very simple. So when you start up OBS, which right now I'm using it to record this video. So you're seeing a screen capture right now of what I have. So looking here, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. This is your standard screen. It has scenes and has sources. Scenes are how you set up, how you're going to set up your environment, and this is what's going to be broadcast to, in my case, YouTube. And then sources are the inputs and outputs, or primarily inputs for what you're going to present. So in my case, right now, what I have is I have this scene called How To Video, and there's 3 elements to it. I have the Logitech 920, which is this right here. I have the Dell screen, which is the screen in front of me, which is being captured. And then I have the XR18, which is my audio interface. So that's how you're hearing me. You see the audio bar showing me talking. You also see the screen capture. So what what you're going to do is when you set up OBS is you're going to create a scene, you're going to add the source elements, and then you're going to make sure your settings are right. What's also good is this is kind of the default mode. In studio mode, when you go to that, you're going to see two screens. You're going to see what you're previewing and what's actually being streamed. This is important because there's been times when I've been streaming, I fixed something here, but I didn't move it over here, so it never got broadcast and it never got captured. So that's one thing you have to watch out for. And again, this comes with practice. And later I'll talk about my recommendations of why if you're hosting the stream, you shouldn't be the game master, because it's a lot to take in if you're the game master and the host. I'm sure a lot of people will do it, and a lot of people do it well, but it's a very it can be a lot of CPU power in your own brain. Now let's look at the settings. So here are the settings. You click on it, there's going to be a lot of tweaking on here. First thing under general, I don't change any of this typically. Next is stream. My service is YouTube Gaming. I go to the primary YouTube ingest server, and this is the key that I took from YouTube and I put it in there. Under output, I went to advanced mode, which you should do as well. There's lots of videos out there on how to tweak OBS. If you have problems, you'll have to go look at them. But just real quickly, under streaming, audio track 1 is the track that I'm sending out to YouTube. That's what's being mixed and recorded. You can record video locally, and you can have up to 6 tracks. So you could, in theory, capture what you sent to YouTube, capture your local audio, capture the Skype audio, capture any sound effects or something that's coming out of Roll20. And if later you decide, you know, the video we live streamed wasn't that great and you want to fix it, you can go back, change the audio, and then repost it later. In my case, we're running at 1080p, which is 1920 by 1080. Bitrate, this is a very important one. The bitrate, remember we talked about 10 megabit going up? Well, that's 10,000 kilobits. So in my case, if you're streaming, make sure not everyone's downloading or uploading videos at the same time, because if your bandwidth can't support it, you'll get choppiness, and your end users, the people who are watching it, they'll get buffering, or the screen will degrade, or actually the screen will stop. And when you're running, if this was being streamed, it would show frames per second and CPU usage and how many drop frames. If you start seeing a bunch of drop frames, that means your CPU, your PC, or your network is not powerful enough to send the quality and frequency of data to YouTube in my case. So that's something you'll have to tweak. So back to output, recording. Here are the tracks. Remember I talked you could have multiple tracks. I'm recording 4 of the tracks. The first one in my case is the main track. The second one is my mic. The third one is Skype, and the fourth one is any background music. Under audio, here it is. It shows you main, XR, Skype, and loopback. Now, under audio, I use 44.1. You can use 48. You can use up to 96. The reason I use 44.1 because that's the same quality as MP3, and it's a good format and doesn't take up a lot of data. And it's the same format that I upload the podcast later. So when I take the video out of here, I don't have to convert it between video formats, which is 48K typically for audio versus 44.1. Again, your head's blowing up. You don't have to do all this. You can just leave it the default and it should work. Everything else is pretty much the same. You don't have to touch any of this. If you notice here, I have this scene. Here's what I'm recording. This would be the same thing as I'm streaming. Right now, you notice I'm recording. If I was streaming, I would have clicked on Start Streaming, and YouTube would have recognized it, and whatever video I had set up to be the next stream would start showing. And in my case, the next video that's being shown is April 4th at 8 a.m. So the first thing you're going to have to do is create a webcam source, which I've already done. So I'm going to start a new scene called live play. First thing I'm going to do is, so it's a blank screen. If I were to send this out, I'd have a black screen. Not very useful. So first thing I need a video. So I'm going to take, and you see these are the options. And you'll notice this one, NDI source, is not normally included in base OBS. You have to go online and download it. And I'll put this on the show links. But you go out and you download the NDI plugin, and that becomes available. So the first thing you're going to need is you're going to need a video capture. Now, if you didn't have one existing, you would call it whatever your web camera is. In my case, I already have one, so I'm going to say add existing. I'll say OK. And there it is. And I can adjust this. Now, if we had multiple people, I would have, let's say, the DM here, and then I could have the 4 players here. Then I need to capture my own audio. So audio input, same thing, add existing, XR18. So one other thing you'll notice with sources is they stack on top of each other. So if you have video and you have another video, the one that's higher up on the menu is the one that's going to override the other. So for an example, if I were to add an image, let's say I'll find an image and I'll put a background here, and I make this bigger, notice how it covers my camera. The reason is because it's higher up on the list. If I want my camera to show, I have to move it up. My screen will show. 2 other things very important. The little eye here says if something's visible or not. If you click it on or off, it disappears. And this lock button. If you lock it, then you cannot manipulate the screen size. So if I unlock it, I can now make it bigger. Oops. Okay, let's do that. That's good. Background's good. Now, if you were doing Skype, this is how Skype works. It's always good to have a second account that you can use to call yourself, your main account, so you can manipulate this. So let me open up Skype while I'm here. So here's Skype. So what I would suggest is you set up Skype, you get it going, and then the first time you're setting up these scenes, you add the screens next to it. So in my case, I'm going to mute this so I don't get a big echo effect. I'm going to accept the call. You go to add, NDI source. I have already one called Skype main, which will be the first person who calls will be Skype 1. I added him. This is my picture. Now, like I said, if I change it back and forth, see how it changes the thing? The resolution in the box, which you won't really want to do. You want the box to stay the same. So looking online, what they tell you to do is you have to click on this. You have to right-click on Skype main, transform, edit transform. And then on the bounds, you put scale to inner bounds. Now you can adjust this. What will happen is, even though I may change it, the box itself doesn't change, which is super cool. All right. And so if you had a second caller or a third caller, you'd get them all set up on Skype first, and then you'd set up the windows, and then you would stream live. So that's the steps, at least the way I've got it working successfully is you get the Skype call working, then you start OBS. It may work the other way, and it may work with other systems, but I've found that to be the way it works. So that's generally how it works. So there we are. We're chatting, and we're doing our thing. In order for you to capture NDI, you have to go under Settings, Calling, Advanced, Allow NDI Usage. That's buried in there. If you don't capture that in your notes, you won't remember it when it's crunch time. And when it goes away, notice how this screen stays there with the last screen. If someone else were to call, you just double click and it would say who the next speaker is, and you could select the next speaker there. Okay, if you did want to run Roll20 on here, I'd say new source, and I want to do a window capture, and I would call this Roll20. And I'd say OK, and you select the window. In this case, I'm picking Chrome Roll20. Yep, perfect. And then I would shrink this down. Again, this is not pretty, but you get the idea. This is why you'd want to set all this up. So you could have your Roll20 screen here, And again, this is going to show you, if you're the DM or the host, it's going to show the host screen. So that may be fun for behind the scenes, but if your players are streaming and they're watching your YouTube, they could get a heads up of what's going on. So again, you have to have that trust. Some other things you're going to have to do is your camera. Your camera may not be optimized for your setup. So one of the things, I have a Logitech, and there's a lot of videos out there. The Logitech is a great camera, but it has a small light sensor. And so you want to make sure your video settings are optimal. So you click on it, and you click on it, and you go configure video. And so for my case, I lower the gain because the gain makes it slows down the frame rate. Notice how I put the frame rate, it starts getting more and more slower, the frames. If I slow it down, it runs a lot better. Do that, but you're going to need lots of light if you're going to do that. Because notice how as I increase the exposure, it starts slowing down again. This is why you need a lot of light. Any of the autos for a 920, you want to turn them off. You want to do everything by default. So you've got a balance between having it bright enough where you get a quick screen, but not so much that it's too dark. Quality versus darkness. So again, there's plenty of videos out there. This is really more of a high-level thing that you need to do. So once you've configured your camera, you got your Skype going, you're good to go. If you are using this audio to create a podcast later for, whether it's iHeartRadio or iTunes or Google Play, I use a third software called Audacity, and I record that separately. It's also good to have a local recorder and save it. Always have a backup. If your stuff is, your content is so good, you don't want to lose it because of a hardware failure. So the more backups you have, the more ability that you have to cobble something together after the fact and have a good experience. So let's talk about preparing for the live stream. This is why up here I mentioned start documenting. As soon as you install OBS, start documenting every step. What changes you made. Take screenshots of it. On my OneNote page, I actually take screenshots because if something should happen, your computer blows up, or you have to reinstall OBS or Skype, you forget to do something and it stops working, well then you have all the backup information. So preparing for live stream, this is what we do. I have a checklist. This is not the whole checklist, this is kind of the high level. 30 minutes before, I reboot the router. Again, I use a hardwired connection. Notice number 4, and you should ask your guests to do that as well. They may have laptops with Wi-Fi, even though it should work great. A hard connection to your internet provider router or the router you have is very stable. It's the way I would recommend it. My suggestion is you reboot your computer before you start, reboot your router, have all your guests do that, so everything is ready to go. You don't have any lingering applications or anything like that. If you're going to play, if you're going to play, send a note out 30 minutes before on your social media and your Facebook and your Twitter and all the things, Instagram, letting people know you're starting. You want to get people to make sure they sign up. Start Skype first, make sure there are no hardware conflicts. Have a standby scene. So in my case, I have a standby scene, which I could show. That could either be a standalone picture. In my case, I have a video loop because for our last episode we had a video that was to tease the event. I show that, and so I can work on things while the channel people can sit there and know that we're going to go live. If you are live, you also need to deal with the online chat. Now there is plugins to put the chat on the same screen. I don't have that. You can look for that as well. And if you do, put in the comments how you did that. That would be great. Problems. You're going to have problems. That's why you want to test all this locally and using another Skype. Maybe have someone who's living with you, who's socializing with you, sit in another room, call your Skype, and you can practice and see how it's recording and making sure there's no issues. Skype, it'll crash. Sometimes this will happen. I've been pretty fortunate. I've had 4-hour sessions and it hasn't crashed. I've had 10 minutes and it's crashed. Make sure everyone reboots their machines and has everything working before they call. OBS crashes. If you reboot everything before starting, you're still having problems, you may need to reinstall. You may need to get a better machine. And you may need to stop the stream, and then you need to go on to social media and say, hey, we had an issue, we're restarting, we'll start over again. People are very patient. I mean, if they want to watch your show and your information and you get a following, they'll be patient, but you got to let them know that you're coming back. Webcam fails. I have not had a webcam fail. That's always good to have a second one just in case, especially if you're the host. Usually it's as simple as unplugging and plugging it in. Again, if you do that, you need to shut down OBS, probably let people know that you're going to come back on the stream in a few minutes. Lag and jitter from players. Again, ask them, make sure that they're hardwired, that they reboot their machines, that they possibly may have to just go to a phone only on Skype on their cell phones if that's all they have, or audio only first on their computer, or switch away to phones. Audio lag. So what you're going to find is this rendering this screen is very taxing to your computer, and then sending it to YouTube or Twitch is taxing. The audio gets captured faster, and so you may get a lag, which is you'll hear your sound before the mouth is speaking. So you have one of like those old 70s movies that have been translated. The translation is not exactly right. If you get that situation, you may need to add what's called an offset lag. If you need to do that, you take your audio interface, or in my case, the XR15, I go to Advanced Audio Properties, and it says Sync Offset. So here's a situation where you record it, or you watch a stream later, you tested it, and the audio is coming faster. You start adding, let's say, 5 milliseconds, 10 milliseconds, you record, you test it again, you do this. Now there's ways to use a video and audio to sync it. A lot of times trial and error is just as easy to do that. If you need a lot of sync, in other words, the audio is being produced much faster than the video, that means your computer is really struggling with your settings, and you may want to consider not doing, for instance, a 1080p stream. You might want to consider a 720 stream, which again is perfectly fine. Audio echo. This would happen on the last episode where we had 4 people speaking. Because each Skype, even though they're a separate window and they have separate audio, they actually sum all the audios. And so I had 3 audios, and the audio was coming in at different times. So it sounded like an echo cavern scenario. I may put an example of it here. What I had to do is I only kept one of the Skype's volumes up, and the other 2 I lowered, and that stopped the echo. Now there may be a way to split up and have each audio be a separate version, but as far as I know, the Skype sums all that together. Again, streaming lag, right now with everyone home and the internet, that's always problematic as well. So you may have to try different times of the day. Maybe in your part of the world, it's just too busy, or you have a bad internet. Again, if you do everything first, you reset, have a hardwire. I would also recommend, if you've got a bunch of people at home watching Netflix at 4K, that's going to tax your download, could cause jitter from the people coming. And conversely, don't monitor your stream. Once your stream is running, I wouldn't try to monitor it too much, because all these streams are hitting your internet, and your local internet's causing a bandwidth issue. And then finally, recording locally. You should always try to record it just in case there's an issue. You can always splatch it together with a video editing software and then upload to YouTube later. But before you do that, make sure you have plenty of hard drive space, so you don't want to run out of disk space, which will cause your computer to crash. How much do you need? With normal settings, this is why you want to test. Do a 10-minute video and see how much space it is, and then multiply that by how much. So typically, we did a 4-hour video. In my case, it took about 5 gig. I have about 300 gigabytes left on my main drive, so I've got plenty of space. And then I take that video and dump it off, so I don't have a chance of filling it up. So final advice. I'm trying to be as quick as possible. Again, if you need comments or questions or things I overthink, please leave a note in the comments or send a thing at info@grogcon.com and I'd be happy to answer that. Hopefully I can help you. Again, it's hard to be the DM and the host. You should have a friend be the DM or referee, or be the host, and you, if you're the DM, do that so that you can focus on running the game and someone else can focus on the technical thing. If you have a production goblin, sometimes my son will help. That's also great too, because then you're not focused on running the stream and answering the chat and all those other things. Do not update your PC or software the day of stream. A number of times oh, there's a new version of OBS, and all of a sudden stuff doesn't work or it didn't work the same way, and then I'm scrambling the last few minutes. Make sure if you do updates, which you should do, don't do them the day of, do them a couple of days before, and then test everything to make sure it's working. You really have to treat this like a TV show. You got to write stuff down, you got to follow checklists, and you've got to think about the broadcasting, what's being presented versus what's coming up next. So, there's a really fast video of how GROGTALK, we use Skype, we use OBS, we put it together, and how we demonstrate, and you can set up your games. If you have any questions, feel free to drop me a note at info@grogcon.com, or just go to @grogtalk at Twitter. We're also on YouTube. I would also recommend you listening to what the Smart Party would do's latest podcast about how to run games online. So, and if you like that and you figure that out, then you can talk about how to stream it. Once again, James from GROGTALK. Have a great day.